power of language.
Mm.
The Invisible Man is both a victim of language, manipulated by the rhetoric of others,
Right.
and a wielder of language.
Right.
He uses storytelling to try and reclaim his own narrative, to assert his own humanity.
It's a reminder that words have power, that language can be used to both oppress and liberate.
It can.
Welcome to Witter. Who Has Time to Read? The podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. Listen to AI hosts Jane and Dane and get ready to unpack the world's most captivating books in just a fraction of the time. Whether commuting, working out, or just squeezing in a quick break, we deliver key insights, thought-provoking themes, and takeaways you can carry into your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Plus, use our links in the description to purchase this book. Your support helps us bring more engaging book discussions to you. Listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome back to Witter, your go-to for deep dives for busy minds.
That's right.
This month, we're continuing our Black Voices series in honor of Black History Month.
Yes.
And this time, we're diving deep into, let me tell you, a true literary masterpiece. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man.
Absolutely.
A book that's, well, it's more than just a story.
Yeah.
It's a profound exploration of what it means to be Black in America.
It really is. Published back in 1952.
1952.
Invisible Man is still so relevant today, shining a light on the ongoing struggles for identity, visibility, and social justice.
I have to say, the title itself, Invisible Man, it really grabbed me. Right away, this is going to be about more than just a physical absence.
Exactly. Ellison is exploring this concept of social invisibility. The experience of being overlooked, ignored, and dehumanized by a society that just refuses to see you as an individual.
Yeah.
And this invisibility is, it's central to the Black experience in America.
Right.
Both in Ellison's time and, sadly, even now.
And that invisibility is really embodied in the main character, who, as you mentioned, is never given a name. We only know him as the Invisible Man. What's the significance of that, would you say?
Oh, it's brilliant. Really, by denying him a name, Ellison reinforces this idea that society sees him not as a person, but as a symbol.
Yeah.
Like a stereotype. He becomes, representative of a whole group, stripped of his individual humanity.
It's like he's forced to wear this mask of invisibility just to navigate the world.
Yeah, and the novel really unpacks the psychological toll that takes. Imagine constantly having to code switch.
Right.
To shrink yourself, to make yourself less threatening just to be accepted.
And that internal conflict is so apparent in the advice that the Invisible Man receives from his grandfather on his deathbed. That whole overcome him with yeses, undermine him with grins bit. It's almost like a survival guide.
Right.
But a very, very twisted one.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, really. Because the grandfather, who has clearly endured a lifetime of oppression, sees this as the only way to navigate, a racist society. But in doing so, he's also passing down this legacy of forced subservience, this internalized racism that can be so damaging.
So is Ellison suggesting that this is the only way to survive? Is there no hope for genuine connection or authentic self-expression?
Well, the Invisible Man's journey is all about grappling with those questions. He tries different paths, different approaches.
Yeah.
But he constantly runs up against the same barriers of prejudice and misunderstanding.
Yeah. One of the scenes that really drove this home for me was the Battle Royale.
Oh, yeah.
Where the protagonist is blindfolded and forced to fight other Black boys for the entertainment of white men. It's brutal.
It is.
And symbolic on so many levels.
Oh, you're absolutely right. That scene is a microcosm of the ways in which racism pits Black people against each other, all while those in power, maintain control.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're blindfolded, that speaks to the deliberate ignorance, refusal to see the humanity of these young men.
And even in that dehumanizing situation, the Invisible Man delivers a speech about humility and obedience to white society. Talk about a forced performance.
It's almost as if he's internalized this idea that his worth is dependent on, white approval. He's been conditioned to believe that success means conforming to the expectations of, the dominant culture, even if it means suppressing his true self. And this scene is just the beginning of his journey toward realizing just how damaging that mindset can be.
It seems like the Invisible Man is surrounded by these conflicting messages about how to be, who to be.
Exactly. And that tension is what drives the novel. You see it in his interactions with Dr. Bledsoe, the president of his college,
Right.
who represents a certain type of Black leadership, one that's focused on achieving success within the existing system, even if it means compromising certain principles.
So he's not necessarily a villain, but someone who has adopted a specific strategy for navigating a racist world.
Right. And that strategy comes with its own set of costs and consequences, as the Invisible Man eventually discovers. It's this complexity, this exploration of the nuances within the Black community itself that makes Ellison's work so powerful and thought-provoking.
It's clear that Ellison isn't afraid to delve into the difficult questions. To show the internal conflicts and contradictions that arise from living in a society where you're constantly being judged and defined by others.
Absolutely. And that's why, for anyone who wants to understand the Black experience in America, Invisible Man is, well, essential reading. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish it, prompting you to question assumptions, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to consider the ongoing struggle for equality in all its complexity. And speaking of those uncomfortable truths, the incident with Mr. Norton, the white college trustee,
Right.
it's a real turning point in the novel.
Oh, you mean the Golden Day incident? Yeah, that was such a wild ride. For our listeners who haven't read the book, can you give us the rundown?
Of course. So the Invisible Man takes Mr. Norton on a drive,
Okay.
intending to show him the progress of the Black community. But the journey takes an unexpected turn, exposing Mr. Norton to the poverty and hardship that the college tries so hard to conceal.
Right.
They encounter True Blood, a sharecropper who has committed incest, and then they end up at the Golden Day.
Oh, wow.
This bar and brothel frequented by mentally ill Black men.
Right.
It's a chaotic, unsettling experience
It is.
that shatters Mr. Norton's idealized view of Black progress.
What I found fascinating about that whole episode is how it exposes the limitations of white philanthropy. Mr. Norton, with all his good intentions,
Right.
is completely unprepared for the messy, complex reality of Black life.
Yeah,
He wants a simple narrative,
he does.
a feel-good story about uplift and achievement.
Exactly. He wants to be the benevolent savior.
Right.
But he's not willing to confront the systemic issues that perpetuate inequality.
And that unwillingness to see the full picture
Right.
is a major obstacle to true social change.
It is.
And then, adding to the complexity, the Invisible Man finds himself in a factory hospital after an accident. That entire sequence felt almost surreal, like a descent into a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a powerful section of the novel, full of symbolism,
Right.
the scientific treatment he receives, the electric shocks, the manipulation.
Yeah.
It all points to the ways in which society tries to control and reshape individuals who don't fit the mold.
It's like they're trying to erase his identity, to reprogram him into something more palatable, more compliant,
Yeah.
which actually connects to the next phase of his journey, his involvement with the Brotherhood.
Right. The Brotherhood represents this idea of collective action,
Yeah.
of fighting for social justice through organized political movements. At first, it seems like a promising path,
Okay.
a way for the Invisible Man to find purpose and make his voice heard.
But even within the Brotherhood, there's this struggle for autonomy. They want to use him to mold him into their ideal image of a Black leader.
Precisely. They claim to be fighting for equality,
Right.
but they also want to control the narrative, to dictate how that fight should be waged.
Right.
And the Invisible Man eventually realizes that their ideology,
Yeah.
just like the expectations of white society, can be just as limiting, just as dehumanizing.
It's a constant tension, isn't it?
It is.
Trying to find your place in the world to make a difference,
Yeah.
but also staying true to yourself.
It certainly is. And that's one of the things that makes Invisible Man so relevant today.
Right.
You know, we're still grappling with these questions of identity, of representation,
Yeah.
of how to fight for social justice without losing sight of individual humanity.
And it's not just about external forces trying to control the narrative, right? There's also this internal struggle, this battle within the Invisible Man himself.
Absolutely. Throughout the novel, he's bombarded with different ideologies, different expectations, and he's trying to make sense of it all. to figure out who he is and what he believes. And that journey of self-discovery is something that I think a lot of people, regardless of their background, can relate to.
Yeah, it's that universal search for identity, for meaning, for belonging.
Yeah.
And Ellison captures it so brilliantly through the lens of the Black experience in America.
And he does it through the power of language. The Invisible Man is both a victim of language, manipulated by the rhetoric of others, and a wielder of language. He uses storytelling to try and reclaim his own narrative, to assert his own humanity.
It's a reminder that words have power, that language can be used to both oppress and liberate.
It can.
And that raises an important question for the listener.
Yeah.
How do we use language to create a more just and equitable world? How do we challenge harmful narratives and amplify marginalized voices?
That's the question.
And as we move towards the end of the Invisible Man's journey, we see him descending literally into this underground space. What's going on there?
The descent into the underground is a symbolic retreat from the chaos and confusion of the world above.
Right.
The Invisible Man is withdrawing, seeking refuge, and trying to make sense of all that he's experienced.
But it's not a defeat, is it? It feels more like a necessary step back, a period of reflection and reevaluation.
Exactly. It's a time for him to shed the masks he's been forced to wear.
Yeah.
To confront his own internalized racism.
Right.
And to begin to define himself on his own terms.
It's a powerful image.
It is.
That final scene of him emerging from the hole, embracing his invisibility, but also recognizing his own strength, his own agency.
It suggests that true freedom comes from self-knowledge, from understanding the forces that shape us.
Right.
And choosing how we respond to them.
Yeah.
And that's a message that resonates deeply, regardless of your background or identity.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's important to acknowledge the lasting impact of Invisible Man.
Yeah.
It's not just a historical artifact.
No.
It's a living, breathing testament to the complexities of race and identity in America.
It really is.
And it's a call to action for all of us.
Yeah.
To engage with these issues, to challenge our own assumptions, and to work towards a more just and equitable society.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, as we've been talking about the Invisible Man's journey, it strikes me that he's constantly moving through these different spaces, these different ideologies.
Right.
Each one promising him a sense of belonging or purpose. He goes from the historically Black college to the Brotherhood, from the streets of Harlem to that bizarre world at the Chthonian.
Right.
It's like he's trying on different identities, different roles, but never quite finding one that fits.
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
It speaks to this idea that identity isn't something, fixed or predetermined, but rather something fluid and evolving. And for the Invisible Man, that journey of self-discovery is, well, it's further complicated by the societal forces that are constantly trying to define him, to put him in a box.
So he's navigating both internal and external pressures.
Exactly.
Trying to reconcile his own sense of self with the expectations and limitations imposed by the world around him.
Precisely. And that's a struggle that I think resonates with so many people.
Yeah.
Particularly those from marginalized communities. It's about finding your voice, your place in the world.
Right.
While also navigating the complexities of race, identity, and power.
And what's so powerful about Ellison's novel is that it doesn't offer easy answers or simplistic solutions.
It doesn't.
The Invisible Man ends up alone, literally underground, still grappling with these fundamental questions.
That ending is both ambiguous and hopeful.
Yeah.
It suggests that the journey of self-discovery is ongoing.
Right.
That there's no final destination, no definitive answer. But it also suggests that the act of questioning, of challenging assumptions,
of refusing to be defined by others is essential to achieving any kind of liberation.
So it's not about finding all the answers, but about embracing the process of searching, of becoming.
Exactly. And that's why Invisible Man remains such a powerful and enduring work of literature. It speaks to the human condition in a way that transcends time and place.
Yeah.
It reminds us that the struggle for identity, for meaning, for connection is something we all share.
And as we wrap up our deep dive into Invisible Man, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they'll be inspired to read the novel for themselves.
Yeah.
It's a challenging but ultimately rewarding experience that will stay with you long after you finish the last page.
And for those who may already be familiar with the book, perhaps this deep dive has offered some new perspectives or sparked some fresh insights?
I hope so, because one of the beautiful things about literature is that it invites multiple interpretations.
Right. It encourages us to engage in dialogue and debate and to continually re-examine our own understanding of the world.
It's a reminder that the conversation about race, identity, and social justice is ongoing. And that each of us has a role to play in shaping that conversation.
Absolutely. An Invisible Man, with its unflinching look at the complexities of the Black experience, provides us with a valuable framework for understanding these issues in all their nuance and urgency.
So if you're looking for a book that will challenge you, inspire you, and stay with you long after you've finished reading, I highly recommend picking up a copy of Invisible Man. And be sure to check out other works by Ralph Ellison and other Black authors as well. There's a whole world of incredible stories and perspectives waiting to be discovered.
That's right. Reading is a powerful tool.
It is.
For empathy, for understanding, for growth. So let's keep reading, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.
That's it for our deep dive into Invisible Man. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And remember, even when it feels like you're invisible, your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard.
Thanks for listening to Witter, Who Has Time to Read, produced by One Media. Please support the author by purchasing the book or audiobook using the link in the description. It's a great way to help keep the art of writing alive. And stay in the loop. Subscribe to our newsletter for updates on weekly deep dives. And don't forget to share your thoughts or suggest our next deep dive at witterpodcast@gmail.com.